sure the government is funded, let alone play a role on the world stage, which is what America is still expected to do.
David, do you think people even notice? And I'm not trying to be flip about it, but there's been so much of this over the course of the last decade plus, which you know as well as anybody, and yet this is as absurd and, to your point, embarrassing, I'm quoting Republicans when I say that, as we've ever seen it. And I wonder if people have just totally tuned out.
Well, I do think there's a lot of tuning out. I think people just think that politics don't really matter, but they certainly are looking at events around the world and in our country and understanding what the stakes are. Whether it's the ferment on college campuses and the anti-Semitic left that's playing out in the wake of this Hamas atrocity and act of terror against Israel this week. It's relevant to people's lives when you have kids, when there's security alerts, when the government is closing down, and it might affect whether you can go to work, whether you're going to get paid, whether you're going to get fundamental services. And I do think people are paying a lot of attention to the consequences of politics that don't work, when government doesn't work, when there's a fear of your freedom being abridged, of institutional breakdown. Those things do start to creep in. This is not just a debate about higher taxes or other events that can seem more benign over the past decades. This is front and center stuff.
David, Phil has been asking the crucial question all morning, and for the past couple of days, he just asked Senator Rubio. And we asked Naftali Bennett, the former Israeli prime minister. So what's next? If Israel's successful in wiping out Hamas, what is next to fill the vacuum? And I wonder your thoughts on that, because gosh, that has to be at the forefront of Israelis' minds, the administration's mind.
Well, it's the crucial question, yes. And there's, I think, a lot of ugliness to play out. I think from the point of view of the Biden administration, if you think about how the president has reacted this week with, I think, refreshing moral clarity about what this was, a terrorist attack against Israel. I think one of the reasons he's done that and is so stalwart in his support for Israel is to have influence over some of those questions about what is next. Do you worry about a two-front war and the role of Hezbollah in the north? Is there an opportunity here to perhaps empower the Palestinian Authority? American governments, going back to George W. Bush, have been 100% behind a two-state solution, the creation of a Palestinian state. And President Biden and his administration would support that as well. But you've got to have real Palestinian leadership. Hamas is not leadership. Hamas is terrorism. Hamas just wants to destroy Israel. There's no negotiation with Hamas. The Palestinian Authority has at least the potential, as Senator Rubio was alluding to be a real partner, as problematic as that's been over the years. So I think that's what you look for down the road. But I think the intermediate step is the extent to which President Biden and his team have the ability to have any influence over what's about to transpire in Gaza over the days and weeks to come, which I'm sure is going to be just a continuation of the horror and the ugliness of what we've seen, because it is a war. And I think the Israeli leadership has made very clear what they're prepared to do now.
David Gregory, we appreciate your time and insight, as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
And CNN is following all the developments on the ground in Israel. CNN News Central picks up right after this break. Have a good weekend.
Hi, I'm Sharon, and I lost 52 pounds on Golo. I realized I needed to make a change when I looked in the mirror and did not recognize myself. I saw the Golo commercial, and I liked how they weren't actors. They just seemed like people that were just happy with themselves and had true results. Since being on Golo, I truly feel like I'm back to the best me I can be. Try Golo. It worked for me, and I'm real.
The Whole Story with Anderson Cooper is appointment viewing on Sunday nights. One whole story, one whole hour.
What are your biggest fears? The breaking of my brain is the concern.
Do you think you could have picked up a gun? You're a dancing.
The world's best journalists dig deeper.
I'm about to do something that I haven't done before.
Into the stories they can't ignore.
Do you ever ask why police took so long?
Go in depth every Sunday night. The Whole Story with Anderson Cooper. Sunday at 8 on CNN. me. This October,
Trick or treat!
spirits come home to rest all month long.
This place is really haunted. What a weird mystery.
With Hollow Stream on Disney+.
We're gonna scare you. Boo.
Home is where the hunt is.
It's time.
What does human talent look like?
Just go on Fiverr, see for yourself.
Imagine working with them.
Yeah, imagine that.
The Source with Caitlin Collins, tonight at 9.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Baldwin with John Berman. Sarah Seidner is on her way to Israel right now. The breaking news that we are watching, we're watching breaking news on many fronts, including a mass evacuation being ordered. Israel just hours ago ordered more than 1 million people to get out of northern Gaza and begin heading south, to move south to avoid what is coming. Hamas, though, has responded to this order from the IDF. Hamas's response, telling civilians to stay in place.
So it is not clear right now how much time the IDF is giving people to leave this region up here. It's north of Wadi Gaza, this wetland right here. You're talking about an area with a population density of about 25,000 people per square mile. That's the dividing line. You can see it's actually the most densely populated area that Israel is now calling on people to leave from. Many of these people, they have no means to get out and nowhere to go. Right now, we want to get right to Nick Robertson, who's in Sderot, an Israeli town 2 miles from the border with Gaza. Nick, why don't you tell us what you're seeing?
Yeah, we've been seeing and hearing airstrikes and artillery strikes coming on Gaza behind us, and I have to say the past 12 hours at least through the night last night was some of the heaviest bombardment we've heard going on in the northern end of Gaza. Right behind me, that's the sort of tip of the northern end of Gaza. I'm hearing more detonations there right now. The Israeli Defense Force say that so far they have fired 6,000 air-launched missiles on Gaza. Now, when you take their numbers back from the last big confrontation, 2014 with Hamas, a 50-day war back that summer, this 6,000 figure in 6 days is already more missiles than the IDF fired on Gaza at targets in Gaza back in that confrontation. So that gives you an idea of the magnitude of strikes. We've heard from the IDF saying that the reason that they've asked civilians to move south in Gaza is for humanitarian reasons. They know they're under a lot of scrutiny. They know they're under a lot of pressure about the climbing Palestinian death toll, over 1,500 already. So they say that they want those civilians to get out of the way. Hamas is telling the civilians to stay in place. They're saying this is psychological warfare by the Israelis. They're trying to evict you from your homes for another time. The only way we'll go, Hamas says, is to our homelands. So already the scene is set. Hamas is telling the civilians don't move. Israel is telling the civilians move, because this is a humanitarian gesture to potentially spare civilian casualties. So therefore, when there are civilian casualties, is Hamas to blame because they refuse to let the civilians move south. And of course in Gaza, Hamas controls pretty much transportation. Most people don't have a way of moving south other than on foot, and we've seen images of people doing that on foot. Hamas would have to provide transportation, buses and trucks and that sort of thing, which are in short supply in Gaza. But, from our vantage point here today, again, it just sounds as if that area in northern Gaza continues to be hit. Israel asks the civilians, move somewhere safer. Hamas says, don't move.
Again, Nick Robertson right here. This is Gaza right here. This is the dividing line. Israel asking people to move south of there. Nick hearing some of the loudest, most constant bombardment of northern Gaza that he has seen over the last several days. Nick, stay safe. Keep us posted as to what you're seeing and hearing. Kate?
We're also watching here, we're going to show you, these are some live pictures of huge protests being held against the strikes on Gaza. This is a scene in Yemen this hour. CNN's Becky Anderson is in Jerusalem for us amid these protests that are happening across parts of the Middle East. This is also as the United States is showing once again its ironclad support of Israel to defend itself now. What's the latest, Becky?
Look, there's no doubt that the events of this past week have once again put the Palestinian issue front and centre in the minds of not only decision makers in this region, but also the general public. And today we've seen mass protests across this region in support of Gaza in places like Bahrain, in Baghdad, in Sana'a that you just mentioned, and of course in Iran's capital, Tehran. A lot of these protests heeding the calls of getting out into the streets and showing anger at what they perceive to be Israeli crimes being committed against Palestinians. Now, in a place like Tehran, for example, these protests would be sponsored and supported by the regime and typically come right after Friday prayers. And the point is to show that there's public backing for the regime's support for groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, that it calls collective resistance. And those kinds of protests in Iran, even Iraq, where the Shia cleric Muqtada al-Sadr was calling his supporters out, are to be expected, quite frankly. But then we've also seen protests in places like Jordan, where masses have taken to the streets to protest against the siege of Gaza and what many fear is this impending ground incursion and subsequent humanitarian catastrophe that may unfold there as Israeli troops battle Hamas militants street by street. And that is what makes this situation so important right now in this region. A lot of people here galvanized by what they are seeing and worried about what's to come, and they are clearly getting out and getting their voices heard. So that's the situation there. I'm in Jerusalem, and let me just sort of close out with this. We've been out in East Jerusalem today, very few people on the streets and very few people at the Al-Aqsa Mosque today. You would normally see the sort of, the courtyard outside of the mosque full of those midday prayers, but it was very, very empty today. And we spoke to people who said it was nearly clear. I mean, the Israeli army has been pretty selective about who they let into that compound today. It was women over the age of 50 and men over the age of 60. We were in East Jerusalem and people were coming back. And there were some scuffles, I have to say. But I've been and covered the violence here in East Jerusalem in the past. It was, I have to say, nothing like that. So I would say it was a sort of, uneasy sense of calm, to be honest, in East Jerusalem today. But as you can see, there are definitely sort of people heeding these calls to voice their protest against what is going on in Gaza. It really remains to be seen what happens next in these sort of hours to come at this point. Back to you guys.
Becky, thank you so much. We're going to stick close to you as we're watching these protests play out and things continue to develop exactly where you are. Thank you, Becky. Joe.
All right, Kate, I have a map of the Middle East up here, almost all of it. Why? Because happening now, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is here in Qatar. He's going to meet with senior officials there, including the Emir and Prime Minister. Qatar has close ties to Hamas and is seen as having influence over the group. The hope is Qatar could work toward freeing the 100-plus hostages in Gaza. Let me give you a sense of the travels of Blinken already today. You can see video of him from earlier, but he began the day in Jordan, where he met with the King of Jordan. He also met with the Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas there. Then he went to Qatar. He's going to go to Bahrain after Qatar, and then ultimately he will go to Saudi Arabia. He is spanning the region right now on this diplomatic mission. So let's get right to CNN's Natasha Bertrand to get a sense of what the Secretary of State is hoping to get out of this. Natasha.
Yeah, John, well, he's really trying to put pressure on these Arab states to, in turn, pressure Hamas to release the hostages that it currently has in captivity in Gaza. And that is one of the main messages, of course, that he was delivering to Qatar, which has very close ties to Hamas and which has emerged as a really key intermediary to try to organize some kind of prisoner swap, we are told, between the Israelis and the Palestinians here in Hamas. And so what we are told is that Qatar has been mediating between Israel and Hamas specifically to exchange women and children that are being held in Gaza in exchange for Palestinian women and teenagers who are being held in Israeli jails. That is what we were told earlier this week. But again, all of this is really going to depend a lot on the condition of the hostages, whether they are, whether Hamas is willing to engage in this kind of prisoner swap. So far, we have not seen signs that they're willing to do that, but this is a diplomatic tour that is aimed at putting pressure on these regional states who might have some kind of leverage over Hamas to try to get them to release these prisoners. Now, Blinken, as you said, he's been going across the region. He was in Jordan, now he's in Qatar, he's going to Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and then he is going to be going to the UAE and Egypt. So this is really intensive shuttle diplomacy here because I think all U.S. officials recognize that time is really of the essence. We saw earlier this morning that the IDF and the Israelis have indicated that they need or that they want civilians to get out of Gaza potentially in advance of some kind of ground operation by the Israelis into Gaza. And so the worry, of course, is that the hostages and the captives there could be caught in the crossfire. So time is really important. It's really of the essence. And Secretary Blinken really pulling out all the stops here to pressure those Arab states to use their leverage and influence on Hamas, John.
Yeah, a remarkable trip, again, in Qatar right now, to Bahrain, to Riyadh, ultimately to the UAE, and then to Egypt. Natasha Bertrand, keep us posted, and we likely will hear from the Secretary of State in the coming hours. Thanks, Natasha. Kate?
We'll bring that to you when he does speak, of course. With us now is Daniel Kurtzer. He's a former U.S. ambassador to Israel and Egypt. Ambassador, thank you so much. First and foremost, you have the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of State in tandem in Israel. They just detailed also the travels of Tony Blinken now. Lloyd Austin could not have been more clear today in the support for Israel. What do you make of this show of force?
Well, you have three messages that are being undertaken simultaneously by U.S. officials. Number one, the president's message the other day that there is no distance between us and Israel. We have their back. And that's going to be reinforced in almost anything the administration says. Number two, Secretary of State, as your reporters have indicated, is out there trying to avert a humanitarian crisis by starting a de-escalation of the conflict, seeing whether or not humanitarian distress can be relieved. And number three, the Secretary of Defense coordinating with Israel on what we might do militarily to deter Hezbollah and Iran from further escalating this conflict. So it's a complicated set of policy activities, but it's good to see that there's this kind of activity on these three different fronts.
Let's go through a little bit of these three fronts, if you will. What do you do? And it's more than complicated to try to figure out and get right, but what do you do about a humanitarian crisis that's unfolding? Gaza civilians cut off from resources, hospitals reporting to be overwhelmed, they're being asked to evacuate to the southern part of Gaza now. How do you get this right? What needs to happen right away?
Well, I think there's two ways to approach it. One is through this de-escalation idea. Can some kind of a hostage release, prisoner release deal be arranged quickly that gives pause to the military engagement? That doesn't solve the humanitarian issue, but it may delay what looks like an inevitable Israeli ground operation. Number two, there are two question marks on the humanitarian side. Is there such a thing as a humanitarian corridor, for example, into Egypt under UN auspices for the temporary relocation of people in Gaza? And number two would be some pressure on the part of Qatar, Egypt, Turkey, and others on Hamas to stop using hostages as human shields and essentially to come out and fight. Israel's concern right now with respect to its ground operation is that the hostages and civilians are in the way, and that's being used as an asset by Hamas. None of these, frankly, Kate, is easy, and none of them may work, which suggests that we are going to face a significant humanitarian crisis.
Yeah, I mean, when Israeli leaders say that they are going to wipe Hamas off the face of the earth, what is this going to look like?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's going to be possible to do that. Hamas is a movement. It's not a card-carrying, uniform-wearing organization. What the Israelis, I think, are looking at is the decapitation of the leadership, and that's what they've tried to do in the past. I think their bombing activities now and into the days ahead will be designed to locate Hamas leaders and see if they can't kill them at that point. A ground operation, should it occur, would be further evidence that that's what the objective is: kill, capture as many of the leaders and operatives of Hamas as possible. But to wipe Hamas off the face of the earth, I don't think that's going to be doable.
How great is the risk, do you think, of this spilling over, talking about kind of the third front here, of this spilling over to be a larger regional conflict?
Oh, I think the risk of escalation is terrifically high. You have the West Bank and East Jerusalem. I heard Becky Anderson note that East Jerusalem is quiet, but we've seen indications of problems in the West Bank. The huge problem on the northern border: Israel's reservists are split between the northern border and the Gaza area because of the threat of Hezbollah, which is a much more formidable terrorist organization than Hamas. And of course, the big threat of escalation involving Iran. Any of these could be triggered by calculation or miscalculation, and therefore the threat is very high.
Ambassador, thank you so much for coming on. John?
All right, the Israel Defense Forces dropping pamphlets over Gaza, telling people to move south. 1 million people here. They want to move over the Wadi Gaza marshland right there. An evacuation south. Hamas says, don't go. We're going to speak to a spokesman from the IDF to get a sense of how they think this is supposed to happen. Stay with us.
Why is Aaron happy? Well, Carvana has tens of thousands of cars under $20,000. So Aaron's folks could help hook him up with a new ride. We'll drive you happy at Carvana.
Introducing Finish Ultimate, engineered for the toughest conditions. Dry, burnt-on stains, old dishwashers, very hard water. New Finish Ultimate with CycleSync technology helps deliver the ultimate clean.
Dig into the gooey flavor of Bob Evans Mac and Cheese 2-count single-serve cups. Each serving of tender macaroni is smothered in grilled cheese. Just heat it up for a great snack or after-school treat and bring home the goodness of Bob Evans today.
New projects means new project managers. You need to hire.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. When you sponsor a job, you immediately get your short list of quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job criteria. Visit Indeed.com/hire and get started today.
Finding a wine you love can feel, well, overwhelming. First Leaf lets you explore wines without the guesswork. We match award-winning wines to your personal tastes. Discover wine you're guaranteed to love at firstleaf.com/discover.
Find your someone at EliteSingles.com today. Meet Gold Bond Daily Healing, a powerhouse lotion that moisturizes, heals, and smooths dry skin with 7 moisturizers and 3 vitamins. And new Gold Bond Healing Sensitive, clinically shown to heal and moisturize dry, sensitive skin. Gold Bond.
In 3 seconds, Pam will decide.
I'm moving closer to the grandkids. Wait, I gotta sell the house.
Don't wait. Just sell directly to Open Door. Easy as pie.
Piece of cake.
Whichever. Get your competitive offer at opendoor.com.
Teeth sensitivity is so common. It immediately feels like somebody's poking directly on the nerve. I recommend Sensodyne. Sensodyne toothpaste goes inside the tooth and calms the nerve down. And my patients say, doc, it really works.
Sure, you can get data everywhere, but you have to use it all the time. That's not really you.
With TracFone, you can get great coverage all on nationwide 5G for a lot less. Plans start at $15 a month, no contract. TracFone.
If you have bladder leaks when you laugh or cough, like we did, there's a treatment that can help. Bulkamid.
And the relief can last for years. We're so glad we got Bulkamid. Visit findrealrelief.com to find a physician near you.
People thinking my daughter is my sister, that never gets old. With CeraVital Advanced, I wake up refreshed.
CeraVital Advanced is an award-winning beauty supplement at Ulta. Get started today at CeraVital.com.
Constant Contact's advanced automation lets you send the right message at the right time, every time. Constant Contact, helping the small stand tall.
We need a small business loan fast.
I got this.
Loan Falcon! There's a better way to get a fast small business loan. Go to OnDeck.com, and if approved, get your funds as soon as the same day. Your loan is on deck.
I love shopping The RealReal. Gucci,
Louis Vuitton,
Prada, Dior,
Rolex,
Burberry, Saint Laurent.
Luxury brands up to 90% off retail.
thousands of new arrivals daily.
The RealReal.
This or that, this or that. You can do this, when you Angie that. You can do this, when you Angie that. You can do this, because Angie's where it's at.
Connect with skilled professionals to get all your home projects done well. Get started today at Angie.com.
This morning, the Israeli military dropped leaflets over northern Gaza telling people, more than 1 million people, to move south now. Hamas is telling people not to leave. I can show you what the leaflets look like right now. This is a close-up of these leaflets telling people to evacuate south, and I can show you exactly where they're told to go. This is northern Gaza. More than 1 million people leave here. It's the most densely populated area. People being told to leave. With us now, from the Israel Defense Forces, spokesperson Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner. Colonel, thank you so much for being with us. Can you clear something up? How long do the people of northern Gaza have to leave?
I think what is more important to ask is, when should they leave? And I would say they need to leave immediately. We are taking our activities to a different level of striking Hamas's capabilities. We are determined in defeating Hamas, in destroying all of their terrorist infrastructure, the infrastructure they use to plan, coordinate, fund, and strike in the heart of Israel's soft underbelly, the people of Israel, where they butchered us in their bedrooms and in their living rooms. So we are warning the people of Gaza that they need to evacuate this area, and I would say now, and they need to do it as quick as possible, because we want to deal with Hamas.
The United Nations said you gave people a 24-hour deadline. The EU today is saying that's totally unrealistic, that 1 million people can't move from here to here in less than 24 hours. What's your response?
Right. Well, I'm really happy to see that some of the reports actually are showing that people are listening to our warning, despite Hamas telling them to sacrifice themselves and not evacuate. But it just actually, this when Hamas tells people not to evacuate, it just goes to show what we've been saying. Hamas have no regard for human life, Israeli or Palestinian. If they had regard for human life, they would be evacuating people to the south, as we suggested, but they don't care. So we are telling people, if you care for your life, don't wait for Hamas. Take your time, take your things, take your family, and move south, because Israel is fighting Hamas. You are not our enemy. Hamas is our enemy, and therefore we are operating in order to remove this threat once and for all from Israel.
Again, this is the dividing line between where you're telling people to go. In the north, it includes Gaza City, the most populous city in Gaza. What do you think Gaza City will look like after this operation?
I'll tell you just one example of something we've shared with CNN over the last 24 hours. Hamas positioned their strike drones on the roofs of houses. They don't care who lives in those houses. They put them specifically on those houses. We took out the strike drones, and this is what we are facing. So the reality of where Hamas has effectively made Gaza, the Gaza Strip, specifically the north of Gaza and Gaza City, a fortified position under the houses of people. So we're telling people, we want you to move so that we can deal with this threat. They cannot be permitted to govern the Gaza Strip as a staging ground for brutal massacres against Israel. We won't permit it.
When you say go where? Because as you well know, the Rafah crossing into Egypt in the south is closed as well. So you're just telling people to basically fold the country in half?
We've instructed them to move south of the Gaza Wadi, which is the Gaza River in the middle of the Gaza Strip, in order to make sure that we can strike and attack Hamas, the terrorist organization that is hiding behind the people. So you can't expect us not to defend our people because Hamas is hiding behind theirs.
I do want to ask you about what could be the repercussions here. Again, here's Gaza. Here's the northern border with Lebanon. Hezbollah obviously operates in southern Lebanon. Hezbollah in the past has said, they've drawn a line, they say if Israeli ground forces move into Gaza, Hezbollah will strike at Israel. What's your concern there?
So the IDF over the last 7 days now has recruited some 300,000 reservists in order to be prepared for all of our fronts. The West Bank, Gaza Strip, and of course, the border with Lebanon and our front with Hezbollah. The situation is as such. I would advise Hezbollah to watch very closely what we're doing now to Hamas. It would be a very grave mistake on their behalf if they decide to attack Israel. We are prepared. We have all of the forces necessary. We have a very competent force, ground forces and naval forces, all poised and prepared at a very high level of alert. In order to confront Hezbollah if needs be.
I do want to ask, one of the things Hezbollah claimed is that some 13 of the hostages died in airstrikes. Do you have any confirmation of that? Do you have any proof of life at this point of the some 100 plus people who are missing in maybe in Gaza now?
No, we don't. Not that I'm aware of. And I would say that Hamas is responsible for the well-being of all of the people they abducted to the Gaza Strip. We expect them to release the people home to their homes in Israel immediately, and they are going to pay the price for the abduction and for their actions and their hostilities and the atrocities that they conducted against the people of Israel. Hamas, they have seriously broken the paradigm that was in existence up until last Saturday on the Jewish holiday. And once they broke that paradigm, we are making a new paradigm, one where Israelis can live in peace and the people of Gaza can live in peace, and where a terrorist organization does not have this sword of death and destruction that they used and utilized against our people on Saturday.
Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner with the IDF, we appreciate you being with us this morning. Thank you very much. Kate?
Coming up for us, in the United States is now 10 days in of a speakerless House of Representatives. Steve Scalise has now dropped out of consideration for the hugely important post with regard to everything we were just talking about in Israel. Republicans are now going yet deeper, further into uncharted waters. The deepening crisis on Capitol Hill, we're going to take you there next.
Kayaking is my thing.
Running is awesome, but her moderate to severe eczema would make her skin so uncomfortable.
I was always so itchy, especially when I was hot.
Now my skin doesn't itch as much. Now we're staying ahead of her eczema.
There's a power inside all of us to live our passion, and Dupixent works on the inside to help heal your skin from within. It helps block a key source of inflammation inside the body that can cause eczema, so they can have clearer skin and less itch. Serious allergic reactions can occur that can be severe. Tell your doctor about new or worsening eye problems such as eye pain or vision changes, including blurred vision, joint aches and pain, or a parasitic infection. Don't change or stop asthma medicines without talking to your doctor.
Healing from within is a wonderful thing.
Ask your child's eczema specialist how Dupixent can help heal their skin from within.
Choosing a treatment for your chronic migraine, 15 or more headache days a month, each lasting 4 hours or more, can be overwhelming. So
ask your doctor about Botox. Botox prevents headaches in adults with chronic migraine before they even start. It's the #1 prescribed branded chronic migraine treatment. So far, more than 5 million Botox treatments have been given to over 850,000 chronic migraine patients.
Effects of Botox may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away, as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness can be signs of a life-threatening condition. Side effects may include allergic reactions, neck and injection site pain, fatigue, and headache. Don't receive Botox if there's a skin infection. Tell your doctor your medical history, muscle or nerve conditions and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects.
In a survey, 92% of current users said they wish they talked to their doctor and started Botox sooner. So ask your doctor if Botox is right for you. Learn how AbbVie could help you save on Botox.
Want to pay only $40 per month with Sling TV to watch CNN, HGTV, MSNBC, and your other favorite channels? You can stream it all on Sling, all for just $40 per month. Try Sling today at sling.com/watchnow.
Carteries. Shop, buy, sell online. Now, ADT professionally installs Google Nest products.
Cool. You're all set.
So your home is safe and smart.
We're gonna miss you.
You can check in on your home. Arm the system, we should go. Manage your system from virtually anywhere. And get intelligent alerts like when a package has arrived. When the most trusted name in home security adds the intelligence of Google, you have a home with no worries. Brought to you by ADT.
You do love playing for your country. Can I get a witness? On the biggest stage.
We're here with Chris Cunahan of our local leaf filter. Tell us how leaf filter is different from every other gutter protection on the market.
With Leaf Filter's patented filter technology, there are no gaps, no openings, no place for debris to get in at all. We install Leaf Filter on your existing gutters. You'll never have to climb a ladder to clean out your gutters again.
You know, that's peace of mind and then some. So how do people sign up?
To schedule your free inspection, call 833 Leaf Filter today. Our agents are standing by.
Jerry is trying to get on the road for a long weekend camping trip. Gary is just sitting down to enjoy his perfectly crafted sandwich. Oh no, Gary and Jerry just received a last-minute meeting invite. Thankfully, Otter has the team covered, with an AI meeting assistant to take notes, generate a summary, and capture action items. So Jerry can go camping, and Gary can enjoy his lunch break. Regain your schedule, sign up for free, visit otter.ai, or download the app.
The Whole Story with Anderson Cooper, Sunday at 8 on CNN.
House Republicans do not know where they are headed next. Next hour, they do know physically where they will need to be, meeting behind closed doors again in search of a Speaker of the House. House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, he won the nomination amongst Republicans, but then dropped out of the race late last night when it became clear that he could not get the 217 votes needed.
I just share with my colleagues that I'm withdrawing my name as a candidate for the Speaker designee. If you look at where our conference is, there's still work to be done. Our conference still has to come together, and is not there. There are still some people that have their own agendas, and I was very clear. We have to have everybody put their agendas on the side and focus on what this country needs. This country is counting on us to come back together.
But it is not clear how they do that. This all leaves the House without a speaker, still 10 days after Kevin McCarthy was pushed out. CNN's Lauren Fox back on the Hill for us, joining us now. Lauren, what is likely to happen today?
Yeah, all we know right now, Kate, is that lawmakers are going to meet at 10 a.m. over in the Longworth office building to have a conversation about whether or not they need to change their rules for how they elect a speaker. One of the reasons for that is there is concern that no one can get 217 on the floor, and that going round after round in a messy battle would just not be very effective. So they are going behind closed doors to debate once again whether or not they should increase the threshold of how many votes you need to get in a secret ballot before you move on to that floor vote. So that is expected to go on for several hours this morning. After that, we are going to be watching to see whether or not Jim Jordan reemerges as a candidate in this race for speaker. But there are already a number of members who've made clear they will not vote for Jim Jordan. You heard yesterday from Representative Don Bacon from Nebraska, who said he doesn't want to reward bad behavior. There were a number of Jordan holdouts who would not vote for Steve Scalise, and there's this feeling that Jordan already lost behind closed doors, and therefore he should not get to run and win the nomination this time around. So there's so many questions right now. Another question is, even if Jordan got in the race, would he be able to secure the votes? If he can't get them, who is next in line, and how long is this process going to go on? You've heard from a number of members who argue that Patrick McHenry, his powers should be expanded at this point, just given the fact there is work to be done on the House floor, not the least of which is giving Israel more aid that they may need. Kate?
Absolutely. All right, Lauren Fox all over it. Let's see what happens in the coming, well, hour even. John?
All right, joining us now is former Republican Congressman Fred Upton from Michigan. Congressman, how much do you miss being part of the Republican conference on Capitol Hill right now?
Well, let me just tell you, my wife and my grandkids are so excited that I'm here in St. Joe, Michigan, rather than back in D.C. witnessing this and missing the fun that they're having here in Michigan. But it's a mess back there. There's no question about that. And it sure appears to me that it's going to languish into next week. In fact, I've heard some reports that a number of members have left for their districts, even as far away as California. So even if the Republicans could coalesce behind one person that could get 217 votes, they don't have that many people in D.C. to actually vote until they return, which means next week.
How do you think it looks? You're on the outside right now. I mean, how does this appear to the world?
You know, it's a mess. It really is a mess. And as I talk to people here at home, it's like a pox on both houses, which is why, you know, I'm actually involved to a degree with No Labels, a unity ticket. We need some bipartisanship back in D.C. to try and get things done. I mean, not only do we have Israel, we got Ukraine, as well as the CR that expires literally a month from now. So no action has been taken the last couple of weeks, 10 days without a speaker. You can't even begin talks. You don't even know where the goalposts are going to be, trying to get something not only through the House, but get 60 votes in the Senate and get something that the president can sign. So a lot of, particularly federal employees, I mean, I talked to an air traffic controller just yesterday. They're worried. They remembered the last shutdown that we had were essential folks, and obviously air traffic control is essential. But they work without pay. It could be, you know, last time it was like 6-7 weeks before it got done. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and that will only build as we get closer to November 17th without anyone that actually has got the reins to try and lead the charge.
Kevin McCarthy was booted with basically, what was it, 7 or 8 votes, 4% of the Republican conference. Steve Scalise was blocked with slightly more than that, but still a minority. He won the majority of the votes in the Republican conference. So what happens if you have this tyranny of the minority running the show for Republicans in the House?
Yeah, that's the dilemma. It's actually, you know, the Republicans may change the rules today within the caucus as to who goes forward. The Constitution still requires that you have to have a majority in the House, which is why, you know, we've got 2 vacancies, which is why 217 you have to actually become speaker if all those folks vote. So that's why, you know, Jim Jordan, I think, is going to put his name forward maybe today or tomorrow. He's not going to get 217 either, which, as Lauren Fox just said, you may see someone like with great respect, Patrick McHenry, who's at least the figure to a degree, but without a lot of authority. Maybe they can give him some authority and at least let him be the speaker for 60 to 90 days and
can I ask,
try to get through this mess.
If Jordan somehow does win, does that reward this type of activity inside the conference?
It does, and I think it's really, I think, you know, maybe he'd get the majority within, he gave what, 99 votes last or a couple days ago to Steve Scalise's 113. So I think he might be able to get a majority, but he can't get a majority on the floor. He can't get to 217, which means you're going to look at Plan C or Plan D as they go forward in a couple of days. But meantime, the clock ticks. 10 days with no speaker, 10 days with no action on these very, very important issues that confront the country today.
Meanwhile, enjoy your grandchildren. Former Congressman Fred Upton, we appreciate you being with us from Michigan this morning. Thank you, sir.
Never enjoyed them more on so many levels, right? All right, we're going to show you some live pictures right now that we believe are coming in. These are pictures from Nevatim Air Base in Israel. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is arriving there. And what we're hearing from the pool of reporters who are traveling along with Secretary Austin, you can see obviously the shot is getting fixed and getting set up. But what we believe you're looking at is Austin is there to observe a U.S. aircraft. And this is moments ago as they were walking. The U.S. aircraft, a C-17 that has arrived carrying munitions from the United States for Israel. And that is part of this show of force and show of support. And as Secretary Austin had said in his remarks earlier, the U.S. support for Israel is ironclad. You can hear that in their words, and this is the physical manifestation of that as you're seeing them walking towards what will be, this moments ago, was they're going to kind of have this display. We could be hearing from Secretary Austin as well as the Israeli Deputy Minister of Defense afterwards. But as we're seeing, this is part of that show of force. Nevatim Air Base is where the support has been flown in. I believe this is the same air base where we saw that cargo unloaded earlier this week with that first. These are live pictures of Secretary Austin now. This is where these munitions are being unloaded. Nevatim Air Base. It's about 40 miles east of Gaza. This is just south of the West Bank. So we're going to continue watching this, and we will also be bringing you more as we see it. We can see there's a lot of moving parts in this show of force from the United States in their support of Israel. The Secretary Austin, wait, is he about to speak to cameras? Let's listen in. Maybe.
It's going to be a little bit before they can get it unloaded on the press center set up over there for you.
That's fine. I just wanted to say thanks to the guys that are doing the work.
Just get a shuttle here and have the controls on everything.
Jeremy Diamond right there trying to figure out himself if the secretary is going to be speaking to reporters. Sounds like it's likely, but I believe oh wow, look at that. That's a C-17 right there, folks.
You fit a lot of stuff in there, and that is what is being delivered right now. What you're seeing right now is CNN's Aaron Burnett, who is standing by, actually, I believe, quite near Egypt and Gaza, inside Israel on the border there. Aaron, give us a sense where you are and what you're seeing.
All right, John, I'll tell you what you're seeing right now. We're actually right near a staging area, tank battalion, that actually went in on Saturday morning right along that Gaza border after the Hamas attack. Some of those tanks actually are going to be driving by right now. I'm going to probably get covered in this, so just bear with me. It's going to be really loud. Okay. John and Kate, there's probably going to be another one. So I don't know how long you're going to want to take this, but I'll tell you what we saw. This tank battalion had been in there. Merkava Israeli tanks. There's another one's going to come here. All these guys are basically restaging and getting ready to go in. And we have seen today, along the border checkpoints, a much, I would say, higher state of readiness than we've observed over the past few days. I'm going to move back from this one just a little bit. Okay. All right. I mean, it gives you a sense for the terrain here. And John and Kate, I'll tell you right now, we're a few miles from the Gaza border. We've been all the way up and along this border, watching the state of readiness that you obviously can see right here. We're also about 10 or so miles from the Egyptian border down here. So we've been all the way up and down that Gaza border and seen the readiness. Today, sort of a mix of, obviously, full troops like you see in this tank battalion, also reservists coming in who are getting ready to go in. And I would say a higher state of readiness even at checkpoints, John and Kate, you know, helmets on, bulletproof vests on. They are ready to go. I had a chance to speak to one member of the IDF. Actually, he was from Long Island. He had grown up there. He's been here the past 4 years. And he had been part of collecting bodies from one of the kibbutz just a few miles from where we are. And, you know, I pause as I say it, and I know you all have, we've all seen these images, but he was talking about how all these houses, right, they, in the kibbutz, they had safe rooms in the bottom, and you all have heard so much about how there's people would take shelter in them. But he said when Hamas could not get into those safe rooms, they would then light the houses on fire. So he said what they found is a lot of skeletons that people had then, when they realized their houses were on fire, tried to run out of the safe room, and then they died in the fire. So he said they're finding a lot of skeletons, a lot of houses are collapsed. He thinks they're going to find more. He talked about finding just charred bodies, children, and then in safe rooms that were still locked and intact, describing the gore and the horror that he saw, just covered in blood. And still sort of speechless. And he said they are ready to go. They are ready to go. And you can see an intensity and, as I said, sort of a rage and an anger, but a level of readiness here today that we have not seen in the past few days, as we do hear sort of the steady drumbeat of artillery around us going into Gaza, and then we can hear moments later those impacts. I don't know if you heard that, but going out and then you hear an impact in Gaza a few seconds later. Johnny Kate, back to you.
Yeah, we did hear that, and if you can stay with us for a little bit longer here, Aaron, I can show people on the map here where Gaza is. This right here is Egypt, without revealing exactly where Aaron is. In this area right here, you can see not far from Gaza, not far from Egypt. It's in the southern Gaza region, Aaron. Down here, it's North Gaza, where people are being told to evacuate from right now. Is there a sense that these Israeli forces are moving toward what could be a ground offensive in the north?
Well, they are ready, and they are staging. And I think that's the best we can describe it. And as I said, the tank battalion, you just saw two of those Merkava tanks right behind me. They have been involved since Saturday afternoon. They said they went in around 3 o'clock, and as you know, those terror attacks started around 6:30 in the morning, so they were among the first IDF forces to go in. But there is a mass, when you look at sort of the map of, and my phone here, sorry, is covered in sand and dirt now, but when you look at maps of where there's sort of a heavy kind of, that obviously is outgoing Israeli artillery, but incoming Hamas rockets, you can sort of see red zones where there's a lot of activity, and a lot of that is down here, a few kilometers from where we are, and then a little bit further north near some of the kibbutzim, which were hit in the original attack, Muros, and around that area. So it's very active there, sort of around that southern area of Gaza. But the entire area, John and Kate, is completely militarized. When you think about the small spaces we're talking about and nearly 400,000 reservists called up, you're going to use all that space. And I would describe it this way. They've essentially created a buffer zone. So right over the ridge from where we are, where that tank battalion, where we were seeing all those soldiers, and where those tanks just came from, you've got a checkpoint, and all the way along the border. So they've essentially created a secondary border out from Gaza that they've essentially tried to militarize. One other point that I would say is they are still dealing with what they say are active terrorist incursions. So one IDF soldier was telling me that when they go into the kibbutz, which were attacked, they found a house yesterday that was locked. And they thought that was strange. Why would this house be locked? They called Israeli special forces who came there. They told me that there was a Hamas militant who had holed up inside, still there from the attack on Saturday. Threw a grenade out. They say 3 IDF members of those special forces were injured. Again, this is what I'm told by these individual IDF forces, and they were able to kill this terrorist. But they still believe that there are active terrorists still inside some of these kibbutzim in this buffer zone right over the ridge that I'm describing to you.
That is interesting. Again, I have a map now up of this border fence, which spans the entire border of Gaza, between Gaza and Israel. Aaron, what you're saying there is that there may have been people who are part of the Hamas operation that stayed. Does the IDF think there are still people crossing back and forth at this point? You know, Nick Robertson witnessed what appeared to be some kind of a firefight. That was, on Monday, but it's a few days since then.
Yes, so The short answer is I am not sure, but I will tell you what they tell us. What they tell us is that they think there are some militants who are still there, right? Like that militant they said that they found yesterday in that house that was locked. So they think there's some of that. There's also question marks about whether there are tunnels that could still have militants coming through. And that, obviously, I can't confirm for you, but they do talk about the potential of that, and they have this fear that that could also be the case. So all of that is going on right in that buffer zone militarized area where Israeli troops are gathering right now.
And just finally, Aaron, I'll let you go because I know it can't be easy to move around right now where you are, but you talk about this area being basically inside Israel, a militarized zone. To what extent are there still Israelis trying to go on with their daily lives in that area?
Well, that's a good question, and I can tell you just from one man we spoke to, it lives in one of the kibbutz which was so heinously attacked, Nir Oz, and he actually has been going in every day through the checkpoint. He's able to because he's a resident, and he's doing that. Many of his neighbors are dead, right? This is the kibbutz where I was telling you the IDF soldiers talking about the blood in the safe rooms and skeletons. This is his home. These are his neighbors. They're dead, about a third of them, they say. And he goes in every day to deal with the irrigation, to try to keep the basics of the kibbutz going. So he's essentially, for him, it's a matter of identity and his life and death. So he comes out at night, cannot stay there, it's not safe. They do let him in during the day, most of the time, he said, and then he deals with the irrigation and the other things to keep what he says the basics, essentials of what made that kibbutz his home going, and then he comes back out. So I can tell you about that specific, that's anecdotal experience, but obviously those towns are uninhabitable now, and we've talked to 5 or 6 people from that kibbutz, and they are all staying places outside, whether it's in Tel Aviv or other places around Israel.
Aaron, as you've been talking about and as we've seen, you've been going up and down the portions of the border with Gaza. Does it feel like a different posture? How do you describe how it feels, if it does, in what you're seeing amongst the IDF forces from yesterday to today even?
From what our team has seen, I'll describe the artillery drumbeat as steady, as regular, but from what we've seen and the interactions we've had with IDF, it does feel at a higher state of readiness and alert today than it did yesterday. Small things, like I described, Kate, today at those border crossings, they are helmets on, alert, all PPE, personal protective equipment on, all of that. They are ready. It's just a slightly elevated sense, a sense of readiness and a sense of, I would say, palpable anticipation. And also when you talk to some of them individually, a sort of very tight-lipped rage, and this cannot happen to us and we will not accept it, and they're willing to say that, and they are ready to go. So we would describe it that way. Yes, it's a higher state of readiness. Unclear what that means. It's unclear whether that means something is happening imminently or soon or what, but there is a shift as far as we've experienced it.
All right, Aaron Burnett, we're loath to let you go because it's so great having you and you're giving us such great information and such this unique view. We will let you go, do reporting. Just promise if you see anything and can get your shot back up, you come back with us right away.
I do. We'll see you all soon.
Okay, Aaron, thank you very much. Stay safe. And just to give people, again, a sense of where Aaron is. This is Gaza. This is the border with Egypt. Israel right here. Aaron, in this area down here, not far from Egypt, not far from Gaza, watching tanks move. We saw 3 of them go by, cover Aaron in dust there. Sort of a remarkable moment. All right, with us now, military analyst Colonel Peter Mansour. Colonel, I don't know, I hope you were paying attention to what Aaron was just saying and seeing there with those tanks going by. What do you think was happening based on your knowledge?
Well, the Israeli ground troops are obviously staging for an assault on Gaza. That means they need to move armor and equipment to the right staging areas and get the soldiers ready, disseminate plans and orders, and then get the fire support ready for the invasion, which I think will probably begin here in a matter of days.
And again, this was the pamphlet that was dropped over Gaza this morning by the IDF, telling people in Gaza, the northern part of Gaza, to evacuate south. You can see right here this dividing line, Wadi Gaza, marshland right here. Some 1 million people being told to move south. What does that message tell you? We'll talk about whether or not it's feasible in a second, but the fact that the IDF was dropping those pamphlets.
Yeah, I think they've telegraphed their hand that they're going to take over the northern part of Gaza, about half the strip. And that would force, they want the civilians out of the area because non-combatant losses obviously would inflame world opinion against Israel. But I don't think moving 1.1 million people out of the area is going to happen. Hamas does not want it to happen because Hamas would actually like to see civilians killed by Israelis. And many of them just simply don't have the capability or anywhere to go, even if they were able to move.
Again, we talk about the population density here, and here is the dividing line. It is the most densely populated area of Gaza, the place they're being told to evacuate from, with more than 25,000 people per square mile, particularly in Gaza City. That's 3 times the density of Los Angeles. What would ground fighting in this area look like, Colonel?
Well, we have a couple of examples in the last 2 decades. One would be the Battle of Fallujah in 2004, but of course, if you remember the Battle of Fallujah, the U.S. troops were able to surround Fallujah and force the civilians to evacuate, so it was a cleaner battlefield, if you will. The second and more likely example is Mosul in 2017, or Raqqa, when the Islamic State was destroyed by a combination of U.S. air power and Iraqi and Kurdish forces. Those areas were absolutely devastated by the fighting. And that, I think, is a more likely possibility going forward. The Israelis will attempt to stay within the rules of war, and they will try to limit non-combatant losses, but it's simply not possible given the terrain and the strategic or the tactical problem facing them.
Colonel Peter Mansour, thank you for sticking around and explaining all this to us. Be well. All the best, sir. Kate?
All right, we're going to have much more from Gaza, from the Gaza border, from in Israel. We've got Tony Blinken traveling in the region. We've been watching the U.S. Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, in Israel as well, showing their ironclad support for Israel. And we're also seeing what is going to come in this call for evacuation of people in Gaza. We're going to take you back there next.
We asked real customers to tell us what they love most about Consumer Cellular.
What I love, the pricing was fantastic.
They care about the customer. It gives us exactly what we want.
The prices, the coverage,
reliability, customer service, it's all there. Consumer Cellular provides the exact same premium coverage as the nation's leading carriers for up to half the cost.
Consumer Cellular offers really great coverage. It's the same.
It was the same, if not better.
The coverage has been excellent. You're wasting your money. You should go with Consumer Cellular.
Get unlimited talk and text with a flexible data plan starting at $20 a month.
What I get out of Consumer Cellular is a very low bill.
It practically cut our phone bill in half.
Compared to the last carrier we had, we are saving hundreds of dollars each month.
Consumer Cellular understands that life changes.
Their plans are flexible.
You could change it anytime you want.
See your savings grow. Add 1, 2, or more lines for just $15 each.
Switching was so quick.
We kept our phones, and we kept our same number. Our customer service team is 100% based in the U.S.
They treat their customers the way they want to be treated.
And we've received the J.D. Power Award for highest customer service again.
Customer service is great. They listen to you.
They are always concerned about my needs.
We offer all the latest 5G phones, or you can keep your current phone.
I upgraded to an iPhone.
They have every single cool phone.
And AARP members get exclusive discounts.
It's like 4 scoops of ice cream for the price of 1.
It was so easy. I wished I had changed sooner. Switch to Consumer Cellular and save up to half on your cell phone bill. Call 888-918-0051. Go to consumercellular.com or visit a Target store today.
Trust me, you'll be satisfied.
The first time you connected your GoDaddy website and your store was also the first time you realized.
Well, we can do anything. Cheesecake cookies? The Chucky!
Manage all your sales from one place with a partner that always puts you first. Start today at GoDaddy.com.
All right, over the last few hours, the Israel Defense Forces dropping leaflets over Gaza, northern Gaza, telling more than 1 million people to evacuate south, to move to the southern half of Gaza. The spokesperson for the IDF told us last hour people need to flee as quickly as possible so the Israeli military can, in their words, deal with Hamas.
Hamas, however, has in response called on everyone in Gaza to stay in place, remain steadfast, is how one spokesperson put it, infusing even more chaos and confusion into the humanitarian crisis there already, and also creating even greater risk for the hostages that Hamas terrorists kidnapped in Saturday's attack and are holding now in Gaza. We have seen men, women, children, some starting to move from the northern part of Gaza to the south, even walking south, carrying with them what they can. A huge question, though, is where will they go?
All right, let's get right to Becky Anderson, who is with us now. Becky is in Jerusalem, I believe. Becky, why don't you tell us what you're seeing this morning and what you're hearing from the Israeli military? Because this order to people living in Gaza to evacuate south, it is a major statement and a major ask.
It is a major statement and a major ask, certainly for those Palestinians who, frankly, are in Gaza and have nowhere to go at this point. So the UN sheltering, and I spoke to the UN yesterday, and the point at which I spoke to them, they were already sheltering some 330,000 people. So that's tough. But let me tell you what's been going on here. Because I think the protests that we're seeing are really significant at this point. 8 Palestinians shot dead by Israeli forces around the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem during protests in support of Gaza, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. Israeli forces shot at Palestinians in the West Bank cities of Hebron, Ramallah, Bethlehem, Tulkarem and the town of Tamun, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. A total of 44 people have been killed and hundreds others injured in the past week since in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. Since these clashes began with Israeli forces, there's been settler gunfire. It's been a tense week as settlers reportedly roamed the West Bank, shooting at passing vehicles. On Thursday, a Palestinian man and his son were shot dead when settlers attacked the funeral procession of 4 Palestinians who were killed in Khusra. Now, Friday midday prayers at the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, very quiet, I have to say. I was out and observing this. Israeli forces reportedly very selective about who they let in to Al-Aqsa, who they let into the compound today. I was in East Jerusalem earlier, speaking with some of those who did get in, and I was told by people returning from midday prayers that only women over 50 and men over 60 were allowed in. Al-Aqsa, of course, Islam's third holiest site on the shrine on the site that's known by Arabs as Haram al-Sharif and by Jews as the Temple Mount. It's the holiest place in Judaism, also revered by Christians. And it is the most contentious site in Jerusalem and lies very much at the heart of the conflict. And John, if we step out for a moment, today we've also seen mass protests across this region in support of Gaza and what is going on there and is, likely to happen going forward. We've seen these protests in places like Bahrain, in Baghdad, in Iraq, in Sana'a, in Yemen, in Iran's capital of Tehran. Protesters heeding the calls, it seems, to protest what they perceive to be Israeli crimes against being committed against Palestinians. Important to note that in a place like Tehran, these protests would be sponsored and supported by the regime and typically come right after Friday prayers. The point is to show that there's public backing for the regime's support of groups like Hamas and Hezbollah. So you know, the sense that we are seeing some very violent clashes in the West Bank, a relatively quiet but very, very sort of agitated day in East Jerusalem, and then these protests around the region only speaks to, I think, where this region is at in putting the Palestinian cause sort of squarely back on the map. And I've spoken to people today, Palestinians living in East Jerusalem, who are not supporters of Hamas. They're not supporters of, you know, armed militant groups. These are Palestinians who are trying to go about their daily lives, caught up in this, but clearly have huge sympathy for the residents of Gaza, who have, as we started this discussion, who have now been told by the IDF to evacuate. They have nowhere to go at this point. That border crossing in Rafah would be the only way out at this point. And, you know, even though there are enormous amount of discussions, and I'm speaking to my sources around the region about, you know, where those Palestinians would go from Gaza, if indeed they open that crossing, it's not clear at this point. So you've got a very, very, very difficult situation at present, and in the hours to come, it will be revealed what happens next, John.
All right, Becky Anderson, who is in Jerusalem for us, just to give you a sense, again, of the geography of what you were seeing there. Jerusalem is right there. Ramallah, where we were seeing video of those protests in the West Bank, not far from where Becky is up here. And then, of course, Gaza, where all this fighting could very soon be taking place in the south. Kate?
John, pull up your map of Gaza so we can show where Erin Burnett's location is. As we're gonna, she's down near the Gaza-Egypt border in Israel, just to get a view, everyone, of where that is, where Erin Burnett is. Let's get back to Erin right now, because there's been there's even more developments there since we last saw you, Erin. What's going on?
Yeah, so you know, we've been hearing Israeli attack helicopters above and quite a bit of outgoing artillery, loud artillery, sort of firing parallel from where we are into Gaza. Of course, you know, the Israeli Air Force has said they've dropped the same number of bombs on Gaza in 6 days as during the entire 2014 conflict with Gaza. So that's the scale of what we're actually seeing here on the ground. And I should say, you know, listening to Becky talk about that border, the Rafah border here, as you both know, we're a few miles from the Gaza border. We're about 10 or so miles from the Egyptian border, and not much further over that border is that closed crossing. And this is what it's like. It's a very you're in a very desert-like environment, as we experience when those tanks go by. I mean, that is the terrain here, and that border's closed. And you think about Gaza and how tiny it is, and how many, you've got more than 2 million people there, and that border completely closed, just not far from where we are. It gives you a sense, though, that if you were to open it, there is the real question of where they go. You're coming into terrain very similar to what's behind me and where we're standing right now. And so that's some of the big questions they have to answer. But again, where we are, we just did hear some Israeli attack helicopters, and again, that consistent, continuing, outgoing artillery fire from Israel into Gaza.
Erin, thank you so much for being there. We're going to continue to stay close to you. I think you've even heard more happening behind Erin as we speak. We'll get right back to you, John.
And again, she was just talking about, this is the border between Israel and Egypt, Gaza and Egypt, the Rafah crossing right here, which is closed from Gaza into Egypt right there. Erin operating somewhere down here in Israel, not far from both borders. I want to go now to Sderot right here, the Israeli town where Nick Robertson is, 2 miles from the Gaza border, overlooking Gaza. Nick, what have you been seeing over the last several hours?
Yeah, more and more artillery impacts going into Gaza, some big plumes of smoke. Apparently, it looks like fires in Gaza. This is right at the northern end of Gaza, right in that area that Israel has told the civilians there to move south. The UN says it's about 1.1 million people, that to do that would be impossible. But I think what we're seeing emerging here, because Israel is asking the civilians to move, to help save their lives so they don't get caught up, collateral damage, if you will, when Israel targets Hamas, its commanders, its bunkers, its ammunition stores, its launch sites, all of that. Israel is saying to those civilians, move south and get out of the way. Hamas is telling them to stay put and don't leave. this, in a way, is being set up for a blame game. And that's an oversimplification for what may play out in the coming days with a ground incursion that could lead to high civilian casualties. We already know more than 1,500 Palestinians have died already in the strikes on Gaza. Hamas will be able to say, well, we blame it entirely on Israel, and they'll try to use that to wield international pressure on Israel to cut back its military goals of trying to take out Hamas completely. And Israel would be in the position of saying, look, we asked for the civilians to move, and Hamas told them not to move. It would be hard to move that many people in Gaza, no, impossible, without Hamas's support to provide vehicles, to provide buses, that sort of thing, because most people there don't have that sort of transportation available to them and won't know where to go. The UN says already 400,000 people in Gaza are displaced right now already. So it's a, if you will, a tragic scenario that's emerging here, but it's not a new one, where Israel tries to focus its precise targeting on Hamas. Civilians become innocent victims in collateral damage there. They're trying to ask them to leave. Hamas is saying no. Both sides say it's therefore the other one has a responsibility, while the international community looks on and will likely mount pressure on Israel as a Palestinian death toll climbs. But we seem to be stepping towards that scenario, and this was a phase of it today. But I think Israel's announcement there tells us that this ground offensive is getting closer. We don't know when, but it feels like it's getting closer.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, they told the people to leave. The UN claims this is within 24 hours. The IDF saying, now, leave now as quickly as possible. And as you say, we spoke to a spokesperson for the IDF last hour who was saying this is to save civilian lives, though the people in Gaza say they can't possibly move as quickly as they need to now. Nick Robertson, Mr. Strauss, keep us posted. We will talk to you again soon. Okay?
Joining us now for more on this is George Birnbaum. He's a current advisor to the Israeli foreign minister and also an advisor to the mayor of Jerusalem. It's good to see you. Thank you so much for taking the time. After what we just heard, jumping off of what Nick and John were talking about, what are you prepared to see, or what are you preparing yourself to see happen in the coming days now that we have this call for evacuation from the IDF for folks in northern Gaza to move out of there? We see the leaflets have been being dropped into Gaza. What are you prepared to see?
Well, I think what we're prepared to see is exactly what Hamas asked for, total war. While the Jewish people and the Jewish state have been seeking peace since 1948 and have achieved peace with Egypt, Jordan, and recently other of our Arab neighbors, Hamas and the Palestinians sought one thing, blood, Jewish blood. We wanted peace. They've asked for war. They're getting war. And that's what we're going to see.
The UN has decried the Gaza evacuation order issued by the IDF, saying that it's impossible for civilians to evacuate without devastating humanitarian consequences. We have some new reporting just into CNN from a senior State Department official that Tony Blinken pressed Israeli officials on the need to establish safe zones for civilians inside Gaza, some sort of safe area where the people who live in Gaza City can go to be saved from Israeli security operations. How do you do that?
Well, it's very difficult. Israel has always, from day one of the establishment of the State of Israel, waged any war in the most humanitarian way possible, if you can even say that, always trying to mitigate collateral damage. But remember, we're not dealing with an army. We're dealing with terrorists. We're dealing with thugs. We're dealing with barbarians who are dressed as civilians, who are hiding behind civilians. And so as much as Israel will do everything it can to mitigate collateral damage, it will not stop Israel. It will not resolve, and it will not stop the necessity of completely eliminating and eradicating Hamas from the face of the earth.
Look, in the State Department, even in this briefing, it looks like that my colleague Jenny Hansler was reporting on, they even note that Hamas is using civilians as human shields, as they have from the beginning, and it's also impossible to influence what Hamas is going to do inside Gaza. With that in mind, would you say that it is impossible to ensure the safety of civilians once the security operation gets underway?
No, I mean, the Israeli army always fights with, within the rules of war that have been established internationally, and they will do everything they can to protect human life. But, we have to make sure that we don't lose sight of the objective, and the objective is the elimination of Hamas. And by the way, I would add that it doesn't stop in Gaza. We know, and the world knows, that the leadership of Hamas is not in Gaza. They're in Qatar. They're living in five-star hotels. And so, one way to end this conflict is for the Qataris to round up the leadership of Hamas, put them on a plane, and let's trade them for the hostages. That will end things very quickly.
Well, what do you think of the role of Qatar now? Because we know Blinken, one of his stops is in Qatar today to start those conversations. We know that Qatar has put itself forward as something of an intermediary to try to speak to Hamas to get the hostages released. But again, as you note, we should remind everyone of how strong the ties are between Qatar and Hamas.
Exactly right. I mean, it's a little laughable that they want to act as an honest intermediary when they themselves are partly responsible for what we're seeing. When the leadership of Hamas is able to sit in their five-star hotels in Doha, recruit money, organize with the Iranians and other terrorist organizations to carry out the brutal slaughter of Jews, they are as culpable as anyone. They have blood on their hands as well. And so we need to make sure that we don't give them a pass. And while certainly we appreciate any help they may have and want to give, whether it's in terms of freezing Iranian money or negotiating on the release of terrorists, I guarantee you that if they were to round up and arrest the Hamas leadership in Doha right now, that we'd find a very quick solution to releasing the Jewish terrorists held in Gaza right now.
So the focus and most important issue right now is dealing with Hamas, getting back the hostages, and protecting civilians, innocent civilian life in Gaza. At the same time, though, people in Israel are asking how this happened. What failed? I want to play for you what one retired general with the IDF told CNN on this. Listen to this.
It's a total collapse. I'm not going to say any excuses. It's a total collapse. It's a systematic collapse. It's the intelligence, it's the whole defense system. The defense system has a lot of elements, it's defense, it's the technology, it's the deployment of the army, it's the backup, it's so many things. It all collapsed.
What kind of investigation is needed to answer these questions to make sure Israel is protecting its people?
Listen, I think everyone knows and understands that once this is all over, there will be a thorough investigation. And what the general said is absolutely correct. It was a total collapse. It was a total failure. But now is not the time to point fingers. Now is not the time to appoint blame. Now is the time to stay united. Now is the time to eliminate this barbaric threat from the face of the earth. Once that is accomplished, then we can look at what happened and ensure that this never happens again.
George Birnbaum, thank you for your time. John?
Yeah, and again, Kate and George right there were talking about Doha in Qatar, where U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is right now meeting with Qatari leaders, discussing Hamas, trying to find some way to get those hostages being held in Gaza out. He's also got other key meetings in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia later. We are waiting to hear from the Secretary of State. Perhaps he might make some public statements shortly. Also, we're following developments here in the United States as well. There is concern over security at certain locations. Stay with us.
If you're on Medicare, remember, the annual enrollment period is here. The time to choose your coverage begins October 15th and ends December 7th. So call United Healthcare and see how you can get more of what matters with our broad range of plans, including an AARP Medicare Advantage plan from United Healthcare. It can combine your hospital and doctor coverage with Part D prescription drug coverage and more, all in one simple plan. These plans are made to support your whole health with $0 annual physical exams, $0 lab tests, and $0 preventive care like mammograms and colonoscopies. And you'll get more for your Medicare dollar with $0 copays on most covered dental services, a $0 eye exam, and an allowance for eyewear, plus $0 copays on hundreds of prescriptions at the pharmacy or by mail. Now's the time to look at United Healthcare's variety of plans. So give us a call to learn more about coverage options in your area. With our Right Plan promise, you have our commitment to helping you find the right plan for your needs. And to help make life with Medicare simpler, you'll get the all-in-one Member U Card. Only from United Healthcare, the U Card is your United Healthcare member ID and much more. Show your U Card when you visit your primary care provider, dentist, or eye doctor, or fill a prescription at the pharmacy, and use it to access Medicare Advantage's largest national network of providers. You can count on United Healthcare to help you get the care you need when you need it. Enrollment ends December 7th. Now's the time to learn more about America's most chosen Medicare Advantage plans and how they can open doors to a simpler healthcare experience with the all-in-one U Card. Call United Healthcare today about the only Medicare Advantage plans with the AARP name and get more of what matters to you.
With Fast Signs, create custom graphics that get tails and tongues wagging. Fast Signs, make your statement.
Mac and cheese lovers rejoice. Dive into the melty, gooey goodness of Bob Evans mac and cheese. Tender macaroni smothered in real cheese. Ready in just minutes with the delicious taste Bob Evans is known for. Bring home the warm, gooey goodness of mac and cheese today.
This is spring semester. There are over 13,000 U.S. school districts which have become top targets for ransomware attacks. But there's never been a reported ransomware attack on a Chromebook, which is why thousands of schools, like the Fairfield-Sassoon Unified School District, switched to Google Tools for education. So they can focus on teaching, and 22,000 students can focus on learning, knowing that their data is secure.
I was only 23 when I was first diagnosed with non-melanoma skin cancer. 40 years later, I've had almost 20 Mohs surgeries. I had just accepted that the pain and the scars were going to be part of my life. But when I was diagnosed with 2 basal cells on my face, I became determined to find an alternative to surgery.
If you, like millions of others, are affected by skin cancer, it's important to know that surgery isn't the only option. There's another choice. GentleCure.
It sounded like everything that I had been looking for.
GentleCure uses low-energy X-rays to kill skin cancer cells with a 99% cure rate. Plus, there's no cutting, no surgical scarring, and no downtime.
I'm so glad I did it. It was successful in every way.
To learn more, call today or go to gentlecure.com.
The Whole Story with Anderson Cooper is appointment viewing on Sunday nights. One whole story, one whole hour. The world's best journalists dig deeper into the stories they can't ignore. The Whole Story with Anderson Cooper, Sunday at 8 on CNN.
Amid the terror and the tragedy, there are so many stories also of heroism emerging as well. Israeli-American Deborah Matias and her husband, Shlomi, they were killed by the Hamas terrorists who attacked their kibbutz in southern Israel on Saturday. They died, but in their death, they also saved their 16-year-old son, Rotem. The family tells us that how it played out was that Shlomi tried to stop the Hamas terrorists as they came into their house, was shot and killed, and then Deborah shielded her son behind her from the gunfire, and she died covering him with her body. Rotem spoke to CNN about his parents and what they wished for him and his siblings.
They wanted us to be happy, to be whimsical. They wanted to be joyful. They wanted us to be in peace. They didn't want us to be at a situation like this, and they want us to live more than anything. They won't die there. They won't die. They will live on in memories and in stories.
Rotem was shot in the stomach. He was injured, and after his parents were killed, he got in touch with His family got in contact with his family, including his aunt, and for 9 agonizing hours, we're told, they were on the phone with him until he was rescued. And you can see that he is now recovering from his physical wounds. We're joined now by Rotem's aunt, Bar Yuval Shani. Bar, you have a remarkable family. You look, seeing the sisters around Rotem, it's just beautiful. It truly is. And you were on the phone with him for hours as he waited to be rescued, for a period of time, laying under his mother, your sister. What was that conversation like for you? I mean, what were those hours like?
I'm going to take a step back, if it's all right with you. I'm finding it difficult to transition into this conversation. It's difficult in any way, but I heard before break questions about the responsibility in the Gaza Strip, and I don't hear anybody asking who is responsible for ensuring Jewish safety, security, for people who love life and are just trying to live. And I would like that to be asked as well. My brother-in-law and my sister were peace activists and human rights activists and musicians, and they were founding members of the bilingual school for Jews and Arabs. I just want to be able to say that before we start talking about what happened that morning. You asked what it was like. We were actually on the family WhatsApp.
Bar, we can take a moment. I hear you. I mean, I understand.
Okay. Thank you.
I mean, I understand I hear you on all of it, and
outrage.
The compounding tragedy of having to hear even us retelling what has happened to your sister, even before we come and speak with you. It's unspeakable, and it can't.
Thank you.
It can't continue, and it can't go on. I mean, I'm looking at the pictures of you and your sister together, and it's gutting. And I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you. I wish I could see you. I would just see a screen. But I'll do my best, and thank you for that. I appreciate it. You asked about what it was like for me. Actually, we woke in the morning to a message from my sister on the family WhatsApp asking if we were all right. She was very concerned for everybody. Something was happening. There were missiles, there were alerts, but also it felt different to her. It sounded different to her. And she describes while we are online with her what is happening. We hear about the shattered, we hear her, I'm going to read this for you, just a bit of it. We got a text from someone there, infiltration in Sderot. It sounds like they shattered the glass at the back door, lots of shooting. She talks about their house being surrounded, lots of gunfire, about a knock on the door, which had to be terrorists. My father writes, lock all entrances, all attention's on you. She says, we did before entering the safe room. We are all very scared. The girls are in their homes and someone can kick down our front door, and the back door is just definitely a lot of shooting and boots. That was at 7:47, we got our final message from her, and there was no response to our messages until a few minutes later, Rotem wrote to us, Mom and Dad are dead. I'm sorry. And then began 9 hours of supporting Rotem, and that we did everything possible to get him through this. So that's the background.
And you are actually a therapist. You're actually a therapist specializing in trauma.
I'm a psychotherapist.
And when I heard that, I thought, I mean, you would be the perfect person to have on the phone, but I'm sure this is a scenario, I mean, you could never have prepared for in all of your training. I mean, how did you find that kick in, I guess?
They were the most difficult moments of my life until then, and I've had my fair share of trauma and certainly working as a therapist under fire. I used to work in the Gaza Strip, and as soon as there was a direct hit, I would immediately come and help the family that had been hit. But this was different. And, you know, when Autumn wrote that his mom and dad are dead, for a moment, people asked if this was real or was this a 16-year-old's bad sense of humor, or, you know, you can't really believe that something like this is happening. And very quickly, then he wrote that he's bleeding. And very quickly we understood that this was true. And I remember saying to myself, all right, you cannot, I knew what was happening in my body. I knew what was happening in my emotions. I saw my sister. I soon learned that he was lying underneath her, that he couldn't breathe, that there was smoke. I didn't know if he couldn't breathe because my sister's body had become a heavy body of a dead person, my beautiful, beautiful, vital sister. Or if he was wounded badly in a way that was keeping him from breathing. Or, you know, but we needed to ascertain what his physical condition was, what his mental condition was, or how we could help it. And the whole family really banded together. From the north to the south of Israel, everybody on the WhatsApp, my brother who is on the job in London, we have a fantastic family, as you said. Among us, and I'm not going to mention everybody, are a paramedic, two other social workers trained in trauma, two of my daughters together with me, a former IDF officer who is now a professor of neurobiology, and many, many more capable people. And we used the time to try and help Autumn through it. It was terrifying. It was terribly, terribly painful. We had to attend to making sure that his helplessness and his hopelessness were reframed into something that he was actually doing that was helpful, so that we could say, your mission now is to protect yourself, and you're doing a great job, and he was. And your mission is to keep us on the phone, keep communicating with us, make sure that we have the location so that we can get help to you, that you're in touch with other people. When he said, I can't wait anymore, it was to say, waiting, you know, I can't do anything. I can't wait anymore. And he was losing hope at that point, and I was afraid he was going to stand up. You know, this long guy who never sits still for a minute, and it's been many, many hours. He couldn't stay anymore in this situation. And we had to find a way to say, well, waiting is actually doing something. This is doing something. And break down the helplessness and break down what it was that made him feel that he couldn't do it anymore, so that we could address that. We got a doctor on the phone with us. When he sent a few voice messages, she was able to listen to his breathing and ascertain what his condition was. He sent a picture of himself. She had him check himself for wounds, and so we could tell him, you know, you've got to hide. How to stop the blood. Cover your mouth. He was afraid to cough. He didn't cough, but he was afraid he would be found. And in fact, the terrorists did come back 3 times to make sure that they've finished off what they had started. Yeah. So we had to take care of all channels. You know, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual.
And you mentioned helping getting him through it from moment to moment. Yeah, and those moments are not over for you, for Rotem, for the family. I mean, coming together for the state of Israel, for everyone who's going to need to come together in these moments. Bar, thank you for coming on to speak with me.
May I say something else, please?
Yes.
It's not just for us and for our country. It's for the entire free world. And it is crucial that people not get politically correct about this. There is nothing political and there is nothing correct about massacring, about making a pogrom and massacring elderly, babies, children, mothers, fathers, while they laugh. They took pleasure in this. It wasn't just killing. They took pleasure. They laughed as they murdered my sister and my brother-in-law and tried to murder my brother. And we hear these stories from everybody we know. They laughed. They destroyed the house. They threw grenades and set fire to the houses, to the cars, to everything in sight, while they had music on. There is nothing political about this.
Bar your
Thank
mouth,
you.
honey. Thank you.
Need your help getting the hostages out as well. This is
Thank
not
you, Barb.
political. This
Thank
is
you, Barb.
hate. It's evil. Thank you.
Thank you so much. John?
All right, so much pain. All right, you're looking at pictures now. What you are looking at is a breaking situation. That is the smoke from what we are told is artillery fire from northern Israel. You can hear some of the blast there into southern Lebanon. All right, those are the pictures. Now, let me show you on the map what we're looking at right now. This is the border between Israel and Lebanon. Let's go to southern Lebanon. Our Ben Wiedemann is standing by there. Ben, give us a sense of what you are seeing and hearing.
John, in the last few minutes, we heard several large explosions in the mid-distance. Right behind me, what you're seeing is the mountain. On one half of it is Lebanon, the other is Israel, and right below me is the Israeli community of Metula. Now, we heard this is a town that's been under, it's a closed military area for the last few hours, but as I said, in the last few minutes, we heard several large explosions in the distance. That, in addition to what is going on to the west of here, nearer to the Mediterranean, along the border, where we understand, according to the Lebanese news, the official Lebanese news agency, several rockets were fired in the direction of Israel. They were intercepted by the Iron Dome system. The Israelis later apparently targeted, according to the Lebanese news agency, an army observation point, and we understand that there are ongoing exchanges in that area as well. Now, this is sort of a change from the pace during the rest of the day. Earlier in the day, it was relatively quiet. In fact, the assumption was that perhaps the worst had passed. Here, I just heard another explosion. I don't know if you heard that as well, and another one. So it does appear that things are picking up. I could hear the impact of that one in this direction. There are Lebanese soldiers here observing what's going on. Okay, I'm just going to step out of the way. If you look at the top of that hill, there's a plume of smoke. I believe, but I'm not certain, that on that side of the hill is Lebanon. But I can't say with absolute certainty. So yes, this just began a few minutes ago. We don't know the reason, the cause, but certainly the tensions here are extremely high. Hezbollah, the main sort of military force in this area, in addition to the Lebanese army, has by and large been relatively restrained since the outbreak of fighting in Gaza. Yeah, I can hear another impact. So yeah, you can see there's smoke on the top of the hill. It appears multiple impacts up there. What I think I'm hearing is outgoing fire, and then moments later you hear the impact. There it is right there. John?
Yeah, we hear the thuds. We hear the thuds, Ben, and if you can explain, and you know this region so well, we've been so focused on Gaza to the south, if you're looking at the map of Israel. You are, of course, on the northern border between Israel and Lebanon, and the concern there from the Israeli perspective, we just saw a flash on that hill I did a moment ago. The concern...
Maybe I should step out of the way. Yes.
The concern for Israel in terms of what happens in Lebanon isn't so much the Lebanese government per se, but it is Hezbollah. Why are they so concerned about what Hezbollah might do, and what kind of lines has Hezbollah publicly drawn? It said, this is when we'll get involved in this.
Well, obviously, John, the Israelis are concerned by the fact that Hezbollah, and I'm just going to pop into the car and get my flak jacket on while I'm talking to you. The Israelis are concerned that if Hezbollah becomes involved, it is a formidable military organization made so, with the help of Iran. And we saw even back in 2006 that Hezbollah was essentially able to fight the Israelis to a standstill. Since then, their capabilities have only improved. Their weaponry has only improved. They have lots of experience in house-to-house, street-to-street warfare from Syria. And therefore, if they become involved, it's a whole different situation than what you have in Gaza, far greater. Yeah, I see another impact up there. Now, Hezbollah has sort of said that if Israel attacks Lebanon, it will become fully involved. Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, has always made it clear that Hezbollah will decide the time and place where it will engage with Israel, and that that Hezbollah will not be drawn into a war not of its choosing. And so basically it does appear that, at least until now, I should stress, that Hezbollah has been hesitant to become involved in this war. Now, this could be simply a passing incident, not necessarily the beginning of something, but it certainly does represent something of a deterioration. John?
An exchange of fire, to be sure, there. We can see the smoke rising above the hill behind you, Ben. You're back in frame now. The smoke rising above the hill. We did see a small flash there. And to be clear, that smoke rising behind you is Lebanon. Those are the impact zones at this point where things are landing. That is inside Lebanon, you believe?
I do believe so, yes. I sort of haven't had a chance to check my coordinates exactly, but I do believe that is Lebanon.
All right, Ben, we do appreciate you being there, being witness to this. Be safe, and please do keep us posted, because these developments are so crucial to see if it does escalate even more. All right, Ben Wiedemann up here on the border between Israel and Lebanon. We're going to go down here now to Gaza. I can show you the situation there. Our Aaron Burnett is in southern Israel, not far. This is the border. This is Gaza right here. This is Egypt right here. She's not far from Gaza. She's not far from Egypt in this region right here. Aaron, what are you seeing now?
All right, so we're just over a ridge from a major staging area for an Israeli tank battalion, John. And basically, this particular tank battalion, they were in on Saturday right after the attacks, among the first to go in Saturday afternoon. And they're now staging, resupplying, and they say they're ready. And that's really what we've seen, because we have been spending time going up and down along this Gaza border. Right now, we're about 3 miles away from the Gaza border itself, and as you and Kate have been saying, we're about 10 or so miles from the Egyptian border. So right here along the south, where there's been massive staging of Israeli forces, and you know, when you hear that going by, those are all military vehicles. I will say they're also, though, busing in troops on buses, literally coaches. So if you say 50 or so of those, just even in the past bit, we've seen about 250 troops just coming in. It's just a constant flow in. And if we're going to think that they've been saying they have 350,000 troops already at this border where we are, they've been just adding in constantly through the day, and we have seen a higher state of readiness, not just with a tank battalion that we're looking at here, but also with the troops coming in, wearing their helmets, wearing their protective equipment. They are ready. There is a state of readiness, and obviously what that exactly means, we can't tell you in terms of how imminent any action might be, but we have seen that shift between today and the past few days, and we continue to hear the outgoing artillery fire followed by those thuds of explosions. In this case, in Gaza, similar to what, of course, Ben was just showing you live as that artillery was coming into southern Lebanon.
Hey, Aaron, stay with us. I want to give people a sense of the distances we're talking about right now. In red on this map, that is the outline of the space that Gaza would be. That's Gaza. And this is superimposed on New York City here. And the reason I just want to show people this is so they can see how small of a space we're talking. This would be the entire island of Manhattan. So Gaza, you know, twice the length maybe of Manhattan, and that's it. So that when we put Gaza up on this map here, and I'll do that again, you know, the distance from end to end here is 8 miles. This is 25 miles, and the entire length where you're operating is only about 38 miles, 36, 38 miles or so. So these aren't big distances, not a lot of space, and they're putting a lot of firepower in a small space, Aaron.
It's such an important point, and that's how, when I say we've been able to go from top to bottom, that's how we're able to do it, because the spaces are so small. But it's also, John, the context you point out. They had said overnight, right, 350 or 360,000 troops were massed along the Gaza border. So you're talking about just a couple dozen miles, and that's how many troops are there. That is more than double the number of troops that Putin amassed along the Ukrainian border ahead of the invasion. Just to think about that, right? You're talking about incredible amount of firepower. The context, though, is, of course, what we're seeing is some of these are battle-hardened troops. We have seen special forces units, for example, coming in and out. And then we've also seen reservists. And obviously there's a very different level of preparation. Some of those reservists may have, you know, they do training for a few weeks a year, right? They're not at the same level of battle readiness as some of those forward troops. So there's a real difference. But they are all massing along the border. And as the strikes are continuing, right, the Israeli Air Force has said that they have had more strikes in the past 6 days than they did in the entire conflict 2014. So that you've seen that continual ramp up, and the artillery fire that we have heard up and down the border. And the Hamas rockets coming in, I mean, we've all experienced that. I mean, at one point we had 50 or 60 of them happen to be on top of where we are, not right now, but where we were. Hamas is using its outgoing firepower as well.
All right, Erin Burnett, again, really going back and forth along the Gaza-Israel border. There's some 35 miles plus or so. You can see how tight the spaces are there. It's a really important perspective. Keep us posted as to what more you're seeing there. Kate?
All right, we have pictures from moments ago of Secretary of State Tony Blinken. We're going to show you. He's expected also to speak in minutes from now after he's continuing his meetings with leaders throughout the Middle East in Qatar right now. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
There's something going around the Gordon home. Good thing Gertrude found Delsum. Now what's going around is 12-hour cough relief. And the giggles. The family that takes Delsum together feels better together.
Every parent knows when it's time to go into protect mode. Adding Lysol laundry sanitizer kills 99.9% of illness-causing bacteria detergents leave behind. Clean is good, sanitized is better. Stop starving your skin and start feeding it. True Skin Vitamin C Serum. True Skin has what skin craves. A different form of vitamin C that's gentle on skin and effective until the last drop. With nutrient-rich blends to keep skin glowing. True Skin. Get what your skin truly craves.
Mornings. Cough? Congestion?
I'm feeling better. All in one and done. With new Mucinex Kickstart.
Headache?
Better now.
Mucinex Kickstart gives all-in-one and done relief with a morning jolt of instant cooling sensation. It's comeback season.
Airwick's limited edition fragrances are infused with natural essential oils for authentic seasonal scents that fill your home with warmth and cheer.
Dale used to hide his smile. Now, it's switching time. He uses TheraBreath Anti-Cavity Mouthwash for 24-hour cavity protection.
And it helps strengthen enamel. Not that you have any weaknesses.
Try TheraBreath Mouthwash.
It's a better mouthwash.
My A1C was up here. Now it's down with Rebelsis.
His A1C?
It's down with Rebelsis.
My doctor told me Rebelsis lowered A1C better than a leading branded pill.
And that people taking Rebelsis lost more weight. I got to my A1C goal and lost some weight too.
Rebelsis isn't for people with type 1 diabetes. Don't take Rebelsis if you or your family ever had medullary thyroid cancer or had multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome type 2 or if allergic to it. Stop Rebelsis and get medical help right away if you get a lump or swelling in your neck, severe stomach pain, or an allergic reaction. Serious side effects may include pancreatitis. Gallbladder problems may occur. Tell your provider about vision problems or changes. Taking Rebelsis with a sulfonylurea or insulin increases low blood sugar risk. Side effects like nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea may lead to dehydration, which may worsen kidney problems.
Need to get your A1C down?
You may pay as little as $10 per prescription.
That
First time you take a step back and see everything you've accomplished?
I made that.
With your very own online store.
I sold that.
And you can manage it all in one place.
I built this.
And it was easy with GoDaddy.
I am doing this.
With a partner that puts you first. Start for free at GoDaddy.com/sell.
Icy hot. Ice works fast. Heat makes it last. Feel the power of contrast therapy. So you can rise from pain. Icy hot.
Does someone who threatens Putin's power ever die unintentionally in Russia?
I don't think so. He just leaves all this carnage in his wake.
Do you think he cares about that?
No, he doesn't.
The Source with Caitlin Collins, tonight at 9.
Join me on my perfect feel-good vacation adventure in Penticton, BC. Well, that might leave a mark. And I did it all fuel-free. Almost. Wow, this is gorgeous.
Jerry is trying to get on the road for a long weekend camping trip. Gary is just sitting down to enjoy his perfectly crafted sandwich. Oh no, Gary and Jerry just received a last-minute meeting invite. Thankfully, Otter has the team covered, with an AI meeting assistant to take notes, generate a summary, and capture action items. So Jerry can go camping, and Gary can enjoy his lunch break. Regain your schedule. Sign up for free. Visit Otter.ai or download the app.
I'm Kayla Tausche at the White House, and this is CNN.
All right, very shortly, we're expecting to hear from the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who is meeting with the Prime Minister of Qatar right now. You're looking at pictures there of Blinken in Doha, meeting with Qatari leaders. He is pushing them to get involved, to pressure Hamas. We've heard people say that actually some of the leaders, the political leaders of Hamas, live in Doha, live in Qatar. Qatar has influence over Hamas, and the U.S. wants Qatar's help in trying to get released the some 100 plus hostages there. You can see them sitting down to begin that meeting. This is a whirlwind trip for the U.S. Secretary of State. Earlier today, you know what? We're going to take a quick break from that. We're going to go right back to Erin Burnett, who is seeing more Israeli troop movement. Erin.
You're going to take this, but I'll tell you what we saw. This tank battalion had been in there. Merkava Israeli tanks. There's another one's going to come here. All these guys are basically restaging and getting ready to go in. And we have seen today, along the border checkpoints, a much, I would say, higher state of readiness than we've observed over the past few days. I'm going to move back from this one just a little bit. Okay. All right. I mean, it gives you a sense for the terrain here. And John and Kate, I'll tell you right now, we're a few miles from the Gaza border. We've been all the way up and along this border, watching the state of readiness that you obviously can see right here. We're also about 10 or so miles from the Egyptian border down here. So we've been all the way up and down that Gaza border and seen the readiness. Today, sort of a mix of, obviously, full troops like you see in this tank battalion, also reservists coming in who are getting ready to go in. And I would say a higher state of readiness even at checkpoints, John and Kate, helmets on, bulletproof vests on. They are ready to go. I had a chance to speak to one member of the IDF. Actually, he was from Long Island. He had grown up there. He's been here the past 4 years. And he had been part of collecting bodies from one of the kibbutz just a few miles from where we are. And, you know,
Erin Schott just went down there again, just to give you a sense of where she is. That's the border between Gaza and Egypt, Israel and Egypt. This is the border between Gaza and Israel. Erin, down here, watching Israeli troops move up and down this 36-mile border between Gaza and Israel. She's been up and down that border all day, and she's seen much greater activity than she has seen in recent days. The Israeli troops seem to be positioning for what could be the ultimate ground offensive into Gaza. We'll get back to Erin when she gets her shot back up. In the meantime, we were just talking about Qatar right here. That is where the U.S. Secretary of State is right now. He began the day here in Jordan, where he met with the King of Jordan as well as the Palestinian Authority president, down to Qatar, he's going to Bahrain later, and then ultimately will end up in Saudi Arabia. A whirlwind day of diplomacy for the U.S. Secretary of State. Let's get to Alex Marquardt right now to get a sense of what the Secretary wants to accomplish with this diplomacy today, Alex.
Well, John, we just found out about Bahrain. This really speaks to how fluid this situation is, how critical it is, because the Secretary of State keeps adding stops. As you know well, when they plan trips, they usually do it long in advance. You know very well what's going to happen, where he's going to be on a certain day. That is not at all the case when it came to this trip. We only learned earlier this week that he would be going to Israel and Jordan, and they've been tacking on all these different stops. So he's in Qatar right now. We're expecting to hear from him and the Qatari foreign minister in just under 40 minutes' time. The focus with Qatar, and each one of these countries really has a different focus in terms of what they can bring to the table to help America achieve some of its objectives. The Qataris, as you noted, they have been hosting senior leaders of Hamas for years, so they are a direct conduit to Hamas when it comes specifically to the hostages. We've reported several days ago that the Qataris had reached out to Hamas about the hostages. We don't know how effective that outreach has been, how successful that outreach has been. John, the U.S. is in a pretty precarious position right now where they are trying to and are very, very vocally expressing the support for Israel and what they're about to do in terms of retaliation against Hamas, but also at the same time expressing a significant level of concern about what is going to happen next, and specifically what is going to happen to the Palestinians who are in Gaza, where they can go, whether there are safe areas that can be set up within Gaza for those Palestinians to go to. Remember, we've heard this evacuation order from the Israelis today, calling on everybody in northern Gaza to flow to southern Gaza. That's over 1 million people. It's something that the White House has called a tall order, something that the UN has called horrendous. And then there are questions, and this is why Blinken will be going to Egypt, is whether a humanitarian corridor can be set up so that those Palestinians can go into Egypt, exactly where you were pointing to on that map with Erin, where she is.
Yeah, again, you know, it's the Rafah crossing right here is the only way out south for people inside Gaza. That has been closed. That is closed. And of course, if the Secretary is going to Egypt, perhaps he may be working on some way to get at least aid in, if not people out. But a whirlwind trip, and as you point out, Alex, everywhere he's going, from Qatar to Bahrain to Saudi Arabia to Egypt, earlier to Jordan, maybe something different from each location that he's after. Very good report there, Alex. Thank you so much. Kate?
Let's talk more about exactly this. Joining me right now is Michael Oren, the former Israeli ambassador to the United States. Ambassador, it's good to see you again. Thanks for taking a moment to speak with us. Talk to me about all of these diplomatic moves that we're seeing, especially Blinken in Qatar right now. What role, how big of a role do you think Qatar can, should, and will play, especially when we're talking about the hostages?
Yeah, good to be with you, Kate. I'm just listening to CNN and hearing these the accounts made by people who escaped Hamas terror, those whose lost loved ones to Hamas barbarism, and it's difficult to make that switch to talk about from personal pain to strategic thinking. I'll do my best. How's that? Qatar plays a very problematic role in the Middle East. It tries to place both sides. When I was Ambassador to Washington, I had a very nice relationship with my Qatari counterpart. But Qatar was also supporting terror around the world, certainly supporting Hamas terror, and at odds with some of our future friends in the Gulf region, the Saudis and the Emiratis. So you have to be very, very careful with dealing with the Qataris. During the 2014 operation against Gaza, Secretary of State John Kerry tried to bring the Qataris into the mediation, and Egypt and Israel and our other allies in the Middle East sort of turned them away. We didn't want to deal with the Qataris. They were part of the problem, not part of the solution. I don't know specifically what Secretary Blinken is doing in Qatar. I suspect it has to do with releasing American hostages that are held by Hamas, and hoping that Qatar can bring its influence to bear on Hamas leaders in securing that release. I do not believe that Israel is interested in having Qatar mediating in any simpler way here. We have used, with that, we have allowed the Qataris to infuse Hamas with cash. And here we get into very murky waters, Kate. We've gone through 5 rounds of fighting with Hamas, and each one ends pretty much the same way. They shoot 1,000 rockets at us. We bomb them from the air for the most part, and at the end of the day, the Egyptians come in and mediate some type of ceasefire, and basically, I hate to say this in a less crass manner, we sort of pay off Hamas. We let them workers come into Israel. About 20,000 Gazan workers are coming in every day, in the hope that would give Hamas something to lose, and we let the Qataris infuse Hamas with huge amounts of cash, a payoff. It didn't work. Hamas wasn't interested in the workers, doesn't care about the people of Gaza, and so he doesn't care about money. He cares about money only for one purpose, and that's to buy weaponry. It didn't work. So what now would be the role of Qatar in negotiations with us? I don't think there is one, but I understand why Secretary of State Blinken might be there in order to secure the release of those hostages.
Yeah, I mean, talk about complicated, and complicated is, there's no word for how complicated and challenging the next steps really are going to be. You talk about the challenge, and we've seen this over and over in our conversations with folks since Saturday, and seeing it even just earlier this hour when I spoke with a woman, Bar Yuval Shani, separating the kind of looking forward and as you were saying, kind of the personal, I don't know, the personal and the practical, if you will. And it's personal for you as well, Ambassador.
It's very personal. We all know people who have been killed, people who have been captured, people who have been tortured, who have lost loved ones. Earlier today, the two sons of the rabbi who who married my daughter and my son-in-law, both those sons were buried today. They were both reserve officers. They're married with children. As soon as they heard there was fighting, they put on their uniforms. They went down south. They didn't come back. My kids have been in funerals. Right now, we're all in our safe rooms here. This is my safe room. Ignore the books behind me. Our family beds have been moved in here. We had a rocket fall not too far south from here about a half an hour ago. So this is all intensely personal, and yet we have to rise above the pain and rise above the fears and think strategically, try to think clearly. What are what is the best way to navigate this incredibly labyrinthine topography of the Middle East? We are very appreciative with that. The position of the President of the United States. I've been involved in U.S.-Israel relations for many decades, Kate, as you know. And as a historian, as a practitioner, I never heard a speech like that. Never did. And we all were watching here with tears in our eyes as the President spoke, and also when the Secretary of State was here, and the things he said about his personal connections. We deeply, deeply appreciate it at this time. We will defend ourselves.
Ambassador, I mean, as so many people can say, and I'm not unique in this, you know, I've known you and reported on you and covered you and interviewed you for a very long time, and this is such a different time. Thank you so much for coming on.
Please. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll talk again soon. All right, so with that, we are going to continue our coverage right now on everything that is developing and playing out in Israel. We have seen troop movements along the Gazan border. We're watching also Israeli shelling happening in southern Lebanon. This comes just hours after the Israeli military has called for an evacuation of more than 1 million people out of northern Gaza, telling them to move to the southern portion of Gaza so they can get out of the way for what Israel is going to do next.
Yeah, this is an incredibly densely populated area. About 1 million people live north of the line. They're telling people to evacuate from it. It also includes Gaza City. Those people being told to get out as soon as possible. The International Red Cross says this is creating a humanitarian catastrophe. Hamas, though, has told civilians to stay put. Do not go anywhere, they say. We're also standing by right now to hear from the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who is in Qatar meeting with Qatari leaders. He's trying to get Qatar to pressure Hamas to release the hostages, the some 100 to 150 hostages being held in Gaza. We are going to begin, though, on the Israeli-Lebanese border right now, where we have just seen some shelling, some real back and forth movement right now. This is the border. Our Ben Wiedemann is there. Ben, why don't you tell us what you're seeing?
At the moment, John, nothing is happening. It's relatively quiet. But what we saw earlier was we heard some very large explosions and smoke on the top of the hill. But then we realized one of the positions that was hit was, I'm just going to, if Sharbal, the cameraman, can zoom in, that's an Israeli military position where you see those lights to the right of that antenna. We saw smoke coming out of there. That's basically an Israeli army position that keeps an eye on the adjacent Lebanese towns, and we understand that one of the towns, Edessa, which is on the other side of the wall, Lebanese town, was struck, we believe, by Israeli artillery. How this started exactly, we're not altogether sure. We have also heard occasional bursts of gunfire around this. Behind me is the town of Metula, where it has been declared by the Israeli military a closed military zone. Nobody is allowed in. We haven't really seen much in the way of movement, so we don't know if anybody is actually, any civilians are in that town. Now, earlier today, several hours ago, to the west of here, near the Mediterranean, also along the border between Lebanon and Israel, apparently, according to the Lebanese official news agency, several rockets were fired in the direction of Israel, intercepted by the Iron Dome system. Afterwards, the Israeli military, according to the news agency, targeted a Lebanese army observation point, and what followed was apparently continued exchange of fire, whether that was small arms fire or mortars or artillery, not altogether clear at this point. But this certainly represents, within the last few hours, a dramatic escalation of tensions along this border. Until these incidents this afternoon, the previous 24 hours were relatively quiet. Now, it's not altogether clear whether Hezbollah, which is the major military power in this area, is just showing sort of strikes in solidarity with Gaza, or this is some indication of something more serious. I don't think so at the moment. Now, the Lebanese army has deployed additional troops. In fact, we went out to one village. On the way, there was just one army checkpoint. On the way back, we encountered 4. So the Lebanese army has increased its presence, they say, to prevent any sort of incident. Meanwhile, UNIFIL, the United Nations interim force in Lebanon that's been based here for decades, is also patrolling the area as well in hopes of preventing a further escalation, if they can. John?
All right, Ben Wiedemann at the Israel-Lebanon border in the northern part of Israel, obviously watching events unfold there. Ben, keep us posted. Kate?
All right, let's go from the Israel-Lebanese border. Let's go now down towards the southern Israeli border, where Aaron Burnett is with us once again. Aaron, every time we've come to you, there've been troop movements, tank movements. What are you seeing now? What are you hearing from soldiers?
All right. So it's okay, just in the past few moments, and we are by a staging order right near that southern corner of Gaza, a few miles from the Gaza border and about 10 miles from the Egyptian border. We just saw another bus of troops going in. Each one of them has about 50. We've seen that steadily throughout the past couple hours as we've been at this particular location. We're next to a staging area that we can hear. We can hear all the action of the staging going on for a tank battalion. And just behind me over this hill, we just saw 6 rockets in about the past 20 minutes. Those rockets were coming from Hamas here, and they were intercepted by the Iron Dome. They were essentially coming over the small town or mid-sized town of Ofakim, where there's been a lot of activity, and that town is essentially, obviously not far from here, but it's in that buffer zone that I've described between Gaza and where the Israeli military has essentially set up these checkpoints, of which we are along one of them, where they have a complete military zone. I don't know if you can hear some of the loudspeakers of where they're speaking up there. So that's what we've seen. We continue to hear outgoing artillery, but the most recent thing that we just saw was about 6 rockets that came in here over Ofakim from Hamas.
Who's down here in this region, not far from Gaza, here Egypt. Here, I want to go right away to Nick Robertson who is in the northern corner, as it were, overlooking about a mile away. He's in Sderot, an Israeli town that overlooks Gaza from where he is. Nick, what are you seeing and hearing?
Yeah, John, typically this time of day, sunset, there's a kick-up in activity, and we're hearing that at the moment. We're hearing an increased frequency of artillery strikes on Gaza, but we're also looking, and I'm going to ask John to pan over there to the smoke on the horizon. We're also looking at the aftermath from here of rockets, Hamas rockets or Islamic Jihad rockets fired out of Gaza. You can see one plume of smoke. Perhaps, John, you're looking there towards the power station there in Ashkelon. That's where there appears to have been one strike. You see the smoke there. And John, if you just go along the horizon, that horizon line, that is actually the coastline with the sea. You can't really see the sea, but skimming along that horizon up towards Ashdod, massive plume of smoke rising there, and that has appeared there since we heard that there were rocket strikes landing in that area. So Hamas still able to put up the rocket fire. I think the big interesting development coming from inside Gaza today, a couple if you will. Overnight last night, we were standing here, we heard some of the, or if not so far, the heaviest missile barrage from Israeli fighter jets going into Gaza. Huge repercussions, shaking the windows and doors on this house, vibrating the whole thing. That was, and we didn't know it at the time, perhaps, we didn't know it at the time, but it does seem to have been the heaviest night of bombardment so far. The Israeli Defense Force say they've now fired 6,000 missiles. That's the number that they fired during their last major confrontation with Hamas back in 2014 over a period of 50 days. So you get a sense of the concentration and the intensity of the firepower in the past 6 days. And the IDF today telling the citizens in northern Gaza, right behind us, where there was a heavy pounder yesterday, to move to the south. Hamas is telling them not to move. The IDF wants them to move because they would like to get civilians to a safer place while they target Hamas to avoid civilian casualties. This does seem to set the stage in a very dangerous and very contentious way, and certainly with historical precedent, for a blame game over civilian casualties. The Israelis are asking the civilians to move. The UN says it's impossible for 1 million of them to move. Nevertheless, they're asking them to move to get to a place of safety. Hamas won't let them do it. So who then becomes responsible for those civilian casualties if and when there's a ground incursion or the military strikes continue? It is one of the very, very difficult and thorniest parts of this conflict, particularly as it builds up to a potential incursion with tanks and ground troops going into Gaza.
Nick Robertson, I have to say, it is a remarkable perspective you are giving us. Just to be clear, over Nick's right shoulder, as you're looking at him, at his left, he is looking into Gaza. Before, he showed us smoke rising over the Israeli cities of Ashkelon and Ashdod up here. He can see all of that from where he's located in Sderot, a little bit of a hill he's on right there. Remarkable perspective, Nick. Stay safe. Keep us posted. Thank you so much. We want to go now to Tel Aviv, up the coast here. That is where we find our Matthew Chance. And Matthew, Israeli leaders now working feverishly amidst everything else to deal with one of the most complicated situations you can imagine. That's 100 to 150 hostages are, they believe, somewhere in Gaza right now. So what's the latest on these efforts?
Yeah, and I think it's really important, John, to bear that in mind as we all sort of brace for the possibility of an Israeli land incursion into the Gaza Strip with the hundreds of thousands of troops they've mobilized on the border, that military operation is going to be severely complicated, if not hampered, by the fact there are those 100 to 150 Israeli hostages that Israeli officials believe have been scattered in secret locations across the Gaza Strip. Well, the Israelis say that they're doing everything, in their words, humanly possible to secure their release, but they're stopping short of confirming to us that actual negotiations are underway through third parties to try and secure the release of those Israeli hostages, or at least a proportion of them. But obviously, Secretary of State Blinken in Qatar earlier, undoubtedly speaking to the Qatar authorities to try and put pressure on Hamas. The overall Hamas leader, of course, lives in Qatar, to try and get some sort of accommodation from them and some compromise to get some of those hostages out. In the meantime, the Israeli government has appointed a hostage affairs coordinator after complaints that enough was not being done to keep the families informed about the status of those hostages, the status of the negotiations to get them free. That coordinator, within the past hour or so, has been meeting with 500 members of the families of some of those hostages in Israel to update them on what the latest status is on their situation, although no details, of course, are being given to us in public. What the Israelis are saying is that anyone who took these hostages, anyone who mistreats them either now or in the future, will face Israeli wrath, whether that's in 5 years, 15 years, or 25 years. And so the Israelis are absolutely furious that this has happened and say they're doing everything they can to get those people out.
Obviously, it is the most complicated situation, the most terrifying situation right now for so many Israelis who are waiting for any word. They've barely even seen any proof of life of these hostages being held in Gaza. Now, Matthew Chance in Tel Aviv, thank you so much, Matthew. We'll check back out with you soon. Okay?
All right. Secretary of State Tony Blinken, you're looking at podiums right now, lecterns. Tony Blinken is set to speak at one of those lecterns very soon. We are standing by for that as he is coming out of meetings with Qatari leaders, and he continues his sweep of visits across the Middle East. Bring you that very shortly. Stay with us right here on CNN.
We know you care. But if this is all too real for you and your loved ones, make the call. Because we care too. Home instead. To us, it's personal.
After 11 years in the world of sports, I know firsthand the toll an active lifestyle can take on your body. That's why I'm excited to share my new secret from Blue Stop Max. Their triple action formula provides fast and effective relief from a variety of everyday aches and discomfort. It's easy to get lost in investment research.
I created a song that can solve the hostage crisis. A song by Paul Beckman, Polly Rainbow Song. Also the new and first leader of humankind in the free world. Created October 13th, 2023. Before I start the song, let's jot down the title, and I'll do something about the song I haven't created yet. Okay, now before I create that song, let's go ahead and try and see what will happen if I call up somebody.
You have reached a voice messaging service. To leave a message, please re-enter the number of the person you are calling, followed by the pound key. If you are a subscriber to this service, press the pound key now. You have reached a voice messaging service. To leave a message, please re-enter the number of the person you are calling. Sorry, that was not a valid phone number. You have reached a voice messaging service. To leave a message, please re-enter the number of the person you are calling, followed by the pound key. If you...
Oh. So, after creating the song, I sent it to a friend to see if he'd like to be the manager and producer of the song. It's one of the most valuable songs in the world right now, because it could solve the hostage crisis in Israel. And he wouldn't let me play it for him over the phone. And he said, just email it to me. So I did. Now after a whole day's gone by, plus the start of another day, I haven't heard back from him at all. Which makes me think, okay, I thought he was a friend. I tried to get a hold of him, but haven't been able to. I haven't heard from him. I told him on the phone when I talked to him that it's a most urgent need that something happen with the song quickly, because it can save lives. And people may be dying. Plus it could also avert a war. So, let's create the song. I created a song that can solve the hostage crisis. Guess we should fix this a little bit. A song by Paul Beckman, Polly Rainbow Song, also the new and first leader of humankind in the free world. Created October 13th, 2023. Well, I created a song that can heal us all. Yeah, that can heal the saw. Yeah, it can be a solution. I created a song that can heal the hostage situation in Israel and save many, many lives. That's what I believe. Well, I sent it to a friend in the end, asking him to become the producer and manager of the song. But I haven't heard back from him. He wouldn't let me play it for him over the phone. He said email it to me, so I did. But I haven't heard back from him, and his phone won't let me get in touch with him. What's going on? Why, this is a song so important to the world that there's a whole weight on it. Nobody knows I created the song, but it's a doozer. It's a miracle worker. Yeah, what have you done with my song? It's a song that can do wonders. I created a song that can solve the hostage crisis. Yes, it can. I created a song that can heal the hostage crisis. Yes, it can. Well, at least it's worth a listen to, right? I believe that it can do miracles, whereas ammunition and weapons can't do what this song can and do. It's got advantages over every single weapon and ammunition. Sometimes music is what you need to soothe the beast. Yeah, music sometimes is the answer, so let's use it. Give it a chance. Give it a chance. But my friend I sent the song to is hogging it. He hasn't gotten back to me. He said he could do something on the song and make it better if he wants. Maybe he's doing that. Or maybe he's just sitting on it and not doing a thing. But it's so important. I've got to get it out. I'm not going to wait. I'm not going to wait a week or a month. No way. It's important that it get heard by the right people so it could do the most good. So that's why I'm making the song. Yeah, I created a song. I did nothing wrong. A song that can help save people in the hostage crisis. It's more likely to work than anything else. That's right.